Good evening, class. This is my creature feature on the camouflaging cuttlefish. So, the order is a little weird when it comes to the cuttlefish. The scientists didn't really want to put them in either squid or octopus, so they said, screw it, and made their own order called Cepidas. The oldest cuttlefish that we found dated back all the way to the Cretaceous, which, yeah, of course, other cephalopods came prior in time, but we're really unclear whether or not the cuttlefish was back then as well. Cuttlefish around 1 to 2 centuries ago were mainly used as polishing powder, but the interesting thing with that was actually they were used as the first toothpastes and antacids. Nowadays, they're just used as calcium rich dietary supplements for things such as birds, dogs, fish, and even turtles for that matter. Due to the fact that the cuttlefish are only found in the eastern hemisphere, their range is pretty large when it comes to that. The cuttlefish range all the way from 15 centimeters all the way to 25 inches, with the largest being the Australian cuttlefish, which can reach a weight of almost 10 kilograms. Most of them are found in shallow reefs, such as atolls, like the stuff we learned in the chapter prior, or in marine channels, like a small port for that matter. Cuttlefish utilizes its ink sac when scared, but they also have something that's a mix of mucus and the ink called pseudomorphs, which makes it so anything that's attacking them can't really breathe out of their gills. They also have specialized eyes, yet they're colorblind, which I'll get to in a further slide, and they have a continuous fin along the mantle of the body. Cuttlefish are similar to the Mylicyrus of cephalopods. They have the best of both worlds. They're extremely intelligent and able to morph their body to match the texture of the environment, similar to, for example, octopuses, but they also have two longer mandibles that they use for hunting, and they can change color all depending on their mood, similar to squids. Males have 4 pairs of tentacles, while females only have 3. Weaker males often disguise themselves as females by hiding 2 of their tentacles, providing them a chance to mate with the females, while the bigger males are out competing with one another. The anatomy of the cuttlefish is very similar to other cephalopods. If you look above the digestive gland, this right here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but that's the cuttle bone. And what it does, it provides buoyancy for the cuttlefish. This, though, is what I wanted to focus on, the chromatophore. Do you remember these toys when we were little that when you would squeeze it, the plastic would get tight and it turns a brighter color, and then when you let go, it goes back to a darker color. It's the exact same thing with chromatophores. So what the chromatophores are, they're organs that reside on the dermis of the cuttlefish, and they're all connected with radial contracting fibers that expand the organ, which allows more color to be shown. The really cool thing about this, though, is it can be done within milliseconds, and this is all due to the fact that it's controlled neurally. One of the interesting things about cuttlefish is that they're colorblind. One recent theory is that cuttlefish rapidly focus their eyes at random depths using a property called chromatic blur. Each color has its own wavelength, and when light enters the eyes, the different wavelengths will bend, causing them to blur. This makes it so the cuttlefish can identify what colors are which just by which section is blurry. Theory number 2 is that the cuttlefish rely on a separate layer of cells called leucophores, which is on the right. They reflect white light, which is combined with all the colors, so in shallow waters, leucophores will be, let's say, they'll be white or a brighter sand color, but in deeper waters, they'll be more darker and more brown and more complex. Research article number 1, Hanlon et al. 2001. Hanlon investigates how the background influences the camouflage of young cuttlefish. The white squares range all depend on the cuttlefish's size. Given the correct size, the cuttlefish can regulate their disruptive skin pattern according to the contrast between the white and the black squares. The size contrast and number of white objects in the surrounding substrate influence the production and expression of disruptive skin patterns in the young cuttlefish. To know the cuttlefish use different mechanisms to achieve SIPSIS, it allows us to know that it's all neural-related. They can do it on demand and transform into whatever they want, unlike things such as frogs, which only have 2 to 5 different mechanisms for SIPSIS. Research article number 2, Hanlon et al. 2011. Hui and West Point conduct tests on the camouflage of cephalopods for military defense purposes. Yes, there is a difficulty in knowing if predators can pick out the cephalopods of a natural environment, so they had to go more of a tech-savvy way. They used a new innovative tech called hyperspectral imaging, HSI, to measure the color match between cuttlefish and their background, which enabled them to model camouflage in the eyes of the predators. HSI employs a camera that captures not only the three narrow windows, like the typical red, green, and blue that humans can see, but captures all 540 of them. HSI offers an opportunity to see things that humans and many other predators cannot due to the limitations of our eyes. Because of the wealth of the information HSI has provided us, the scientists could extract a small amount of the data and compile an image from the perspective of a predator. Research article number 3, Shashier et al., 1996. Cuttlefish were put in a tank with mirrors to see their behavior. The mirrors accurately reflected the polarization patterns of each cuttlefish. One glass was a high-quality Pyrex, while the other one was heated and cooled several times to create stress within it. The stress disordered any polarization pattern, but otherwise did not affect the transparency of the filter, nor did it cause a chromatic or pattern change in the animal. They did this consistently 10 times and only lasted 30 seconds each time unless the cuttlefish got within the touching range of the glass. Observers were unaware of the different filters in the glass and were instructed to only write about the animal's actions, not about the meanings or motivation. Cuttlefish displayed a polarization pattern that sent a stripe down the middle of each arm, down the middle of the mantle, and around the eyes. This occurred when the animal is hovering or laying down but still alert, sort of like a sentry mode. When camouflaged, almost all the polarization stopped, but started back up when the animal was spooked by something moving. While mating, the polarization in males would diminish, similar to when females would lay their eggs. It would start up once they let go, or if a male had to compete with another male, or if they had to hunt for something for that matter. Here in this chart that describes what I was going over in article number 3, it just goes through basically at first the animal number, what types of filters were used on the glass, and then it goes into the behavior of what they did when they saw their reflection. The two that stick out to me the most was the moved away from the mirror, which all in total, with the first kind of mirror, 55 moved away when when they did it again, 39 did the same thing but darkened their skin color, which just goes it means we're getting closer to understanding them, but they're still really confusing animals. Here in this extra research article that I found at Taiwan's National Tsinghua University, they actually found that cuttlefish can count. 51 one-month-old cuttlefish were presented with two separate boxes. One box had one shrimp, while the other box had five. Yeah, I know, it does seem like it would be natural to go for the larger amount, but they even tested it with other numbers, like, say, one box had four shrimp and the other had five. They even did this with, say, a larger container, they put the five in, so they spread out and they used the four shrimp in a smaller container, so it looked like there were more. But regardless, the cuttlefish always went for the container with more fish. To conclude my creature feature, chromatophores have helped cuttlefish survive for millions of years. The pigment in their skin is actually ink-filled organs that dilate and contract at a millisecond's notice, which is controlled neurologically, which is something I had no clue about before this presentation. Humans have nowhere near the technology needed to replicate this, despite the military putting in millions and millions of dollars a year for research. More research will be needed to study these animals and see how they work, but all in all research centers around Hanlon's checker experiment. Here's some cool videos that I recommend you guys all watch about the cuttlefish. I mean, it helped me when I was growing up because these were my favorite animals. And here are my references.